Hello and welcome to another episode of The Zoo. Today we're going to talk about digital service management from the channel's perspective. How can partners and VARs take advantage of BMC Software's latest iteration of itself, the digital service management? Used to be ITSM was something that the channel took, made it their own and resold, but with new modern technology, very much like when cloud first introduced, it gives them something to think about. It provides new challenges, but it also opens up the door to great new markets. With me today is Dick Stark from RightStar, a major reseller of BMC software and other IT service management tools. And he has been in this business long enough to know what is what and is going to share with us his view of digital service management. Thank you for joining us, Dick.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's terrific to be here.
You saw at our latest big get-together how BMC has trying to reinvent itself, becoming something more of a digital service management provider than just traditional IT service management. And with that comes new products, new solutions, and so on, and new type of thinking from IT is king to more people are the boss. How do you define, how do you see digital service management in general?
Well, I think if you want to start, I would look first at traditional ITSM. Okay, and ITSM, the mantra there was all about better, cheaper, and faster, right? And so if you take it a step further, now you've got digital service management, and it's still about being, better, cheaper, and faster, but it's more about sort of drilling down a little bit more and taking a look at, well, how are you better? Well, it's better because you're going to improve customer satisfaction. Or how are you cheaper? Well, we can reduce the overall cost of service management. Or how are we faster? Well, it's more efficient. But what I think the main difference is that people are really looking at this software and they're saying, well, am I a cost center, or is it some sort of a value add? And if it's a value add, how are we providing business value? So that's what we ought to be looking at, and that's what BMC's done, is they basically said, okay, now we've looked at the software, we've watched people as they do their jobs, and it's all about how we can automate things to make things faster. And so BMC's come out with some new tools. There's obviously there's a number of them: Smart IT, My IT, there's Smart Reporting, there's My IT Service Broker, and these are new features and new functions that go with the traditional Remedy product. And it's more than just taking a step forward and saying, okay, off with the old and away with the new. It's really more than that. It has to do with the value that I mentioned before. And I can give you a couple examples if you'd like then too.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think when companies buy software, especially ITSM, or now we call it DSM software, oftentimes you buy a list, you get a list of requirements, okay, and especially maybe for competing against one of your biggest competitors, they've got this huge list of requirements, and it's all these things that they may or may not do. Probably they're not going to do 90% of them, but they may put this list together just because maybe they want the competitor's product and they know that maybe BMC doesn't do with one of these things. So they say, yeah, hey, you got to do all these things. Well, that's absolutely the wrong way to buy software. You ought to start with business outcomes. What is it that you really want here? And maybe it's, just take an example. Maybe it's a specific takeaway here is you want to improve customer satisfaction. Okay, well, to do that, you might say, well, we're at 85% customer satisfaction and we want to get to 95 or something like that. Well, having a product like My IT may help you get there because it's so user-friendly, and it's a cool product to use. It's GPS enabled, and especially when you combine that, if you replace the old SRM product with My IT, it gives you a better overall user experience. And I think that's important. But companies don't really buy it that way. Another example is with Smart IT. You might be typing away, you get a call, and you type away, this is what the incident is. And all of a sudden you see, because it's searching the knowledge base at the same time, you see an answer that will pop up. Well, this is a lot more efficient. It makes it easier for that analyst to do their job. and it's not something that anybody else can really do a very good job of. So I mean, BMC has a leg up. Is it providing business value? It sure is, because it's making that person easier to do their job. And then remember, who are the customers of the service management software? Would be the employees of that particular organization. If it makes everybody do their job, then it makes everybody is happier, makes it more efficient. It's an overall good thing. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And my question is, these are things that one would think should have been part of any type of ITSM or DSM solution a long time ago. Why is it coming to the forefront now? Why is there a market for it now? Because BMC could have built this earlier, but I guess it was waiting for the right moment. Is this because of consumerization is actually making it to the doors of the enterprise and cracking down the door?
I think that's certainly part of it. But the other reason is that companies just aren't that mature, and now they're starting to get there. I mean, just to give you an example, it's just amazing how far we've come in just a short amount of time. I've been a long time runner, and I had hurt my knee a couple of years ago, and I haven't really run for a couple of years. So now I've got a Garmin watch, and everything's digitized. Okay, so I can go out for a run, and now it tells me how far I'm going. It tells me how fast I've gone. It tells me how many steps per second or per minute. I'm not even sure. It's got all this detail. Before, I used to just go out for a run, and then I would, I'd leave and I'd come back, and that'd be about it. And so now you've got all this big data that's out there, and people are starting to realize, well, there's some real value here with all this information. Let's make something out of it. So that applies to the ITSM side or DSM side as well. So companies are becoming a little bit more mature, and you're taking advantage of that data that's out there. Not everybody is. I mean, we did a survey of our customer base actually about a year ago, and we got the idea from an article that was called, I think, Moving from Survivors to Thrivers. And I don't know if it was an IDC study. I don't know if you happened to read that. Did you happen to see that about that? When BMC sent it out, it was really kind of interesting. But the one thing, after surveying all the customers, first of all, we found that only about 15% are actual thrivers. Okay, so the rest of them, and to be a thriver, you may want to use second or third party platforms like social, mobility, cloud, that sort of thing. You might also want to use self-service. Okay, and if you weren't doing those things, then we're kind of considered to be just a survivor. It's a year or so later, it's about this. Have you heard of the term bimodal IT before? So it's either mode one is kind of ITSM, waterfall approach. Mode 2 is more agile, and so everybody wants the bimodal bridge to mode 2 is to kind of go the DevOps route. So that's kind of what's happened. It's how do you get more? Again, it goes back to how do you get more value, show more business value, and it's get on the path to mode 2, or in this case, become a survivor. Become a thriver, not a survivor. And companies are starting to realize that it's taken time, but they're going to get there. So BMC, with the tools like MyIT and Smart IT, provides the best way that I know to take advantage of that.
And there's analyst reports out there saying that if you do not become a thriver, you will go under. If you are digitally incompetent, or something to that phrase, you will no longer be able to hold on to your market position, and you will fade away. Is it that dire, or is this a do or die move for most corporations, that is to modernize?
Yeah, well, I think so. And part of that has to do with the whole DevOps or the Agile philosophy as well. And just take a look at the companies like Amazon now. And it's hard to believe, but Amazon issues 1,000 software releases in an hour, something like that. I think Flickr started this whole thing. And when you think of enterprise software, you think of, from BMC, well, they get release out on the Remedy side, on the on-premise side, and maybe it's every 6 months or so. So there's reasons why that it's a totally different model. But with more SaaS-based or on-demand-based software, I think you're going to see quicker releases, and companies, especially if you're a consumer-based company, it's really going to be dependent. Maybe your retail organization is going to be dependent on the software program that you have in order to attract and retain customers. So that's kind of what it's all about.
How do you keep track of all that? Thousands. I mean, thousands.
I don't know. I don't know. That's what this whole big data thing is all about, and it's kind of mind-boggling to me. I mean, you got to be, not only do you have to keep track of it, but you got to make sure that somebody else doesn't steal it or get to it as well. You know, security is such a big issue now as well.
Yeah.
No, that's what I think something.
When you go out and talk to customers, does bringing the DSM story to them, does it resonate? Does it make it easier for you to get traction with both existing customers and new customers? The people you talk to, how do they respond to this new?
Yeah, I mean, some better than others, obviously. And let me just give you another example. We have a customer, it's a University of Virginia Health Services. So in other words, they're middle-sized hospital. I think they've got about 500 beds, something like that. They've been a long-time legacy remedy shop. And they just recently hired a new director down there who reports to the CIO. And her job is to work with their ERP systems that they have. So they've got Epic, I believe, and then they've got a medical records software program. And then the third thing, of course, is Remedy. So they really get it. It's kind of like they're taking a page from the BMC playbook, and they're positioning Remedy clearly as the center of the IT universe. And then they're saying, well, because customer satisfaction is so important, it's a digital world right now, we have to provide that excellent experience to all the employees. And because it's healthcare, you know, things have to really be clicking. And as a result, we're going to use my IT to do that. Okay, so they have iPads and iPhones and all that, and then they wanted to have this very pleasing user interface and kind of a single pane of glass, so to speak. And so we just help them. In fact, today is June 1. They're actually just in the process of going live. Now, they went live earlier with version 9, but now they're going live with the My IT, and it was called, I have it right here. It was called, it's My, instead of the My IT portal, they rebranded it as the My HIT portal, and they have about 25 new service requests. And again, the whole idea is to get everybody behind them, improve efficiency, lower the overall cost, and improve customer satisfaction. So I think they get it. Now, I wish everybody thought like that. Sometimes, it's a necessary evil kind of thing, but I think that's a good example of where customers are going. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those initiatives that both our customers and BMC is supporting to within DSM, within Digital Service Management, is what we refer to as the digital workplace, where employees are more empowered, more engaged, can communicate 24/7, anywhere, anytime. That's easy for me to sit here in Silicon Valley and say, that's the way we're going. You are also in a tech-centric world, but you deal with people that are not necessarily in the same, in a high-tech industry. Are we shifting our thinking away from saving money, squeezing as much as we can out of people, and started to see how do we empower them and actually make them more innovative?
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I don't know that it really makes any difference where you are. You know, the one thing that surprised me a little bit is this whole issue of cost savings, right? Because you would think, you know, how important is it to save money? And that was the one thing that I kind of suspected when we did that. I told you we did this survey before, and sure enough, customer satisfaction came back as the #1 thing that they wanted from an ITSM system. And I thought, well, cost savings ought to come in as maybe as #2. But it didn't really even make the list. And maybe these are because they were bigger customers or not as cost conscious. And the interesting thing about that, I was at a CIO forum not too long ago, and I had an opportunity. I love to go into these things because I like to ask questions. And so I explained about the survey that we have done, and I said, you know, the mantra is better, faster, and cheaper. And I said that the surprising thing was that most of the organizations that we talked to didn't really seem to be too concerned about saving money. And I said, why is that? And so, you know, one CIO answered, he said, well, you know, we've got just a huge budget. If we're a very big organization, and the IT portion or the IT budget is still very large, and the ITSM section is just kind of a rounding kind of error in terms of our total ITSM or IT budget spent. I mean, so in other words, we don't really care if we're going to save $100,000 or $150,000. We just want something that works and does well. And so then another CIO said, well, better, cheaper, faster, pick two, right? So it sort of told me that not everybody is cost conscious, but it's something that I think that it's going to happen down the road. It's kind of like Uber, right? Because you're in Silicon Valley, right? I was out there not too long ago, and Uber's pretty big out there, and as it is, pretty much everywhere. So why do you think people use Uber then? Is it because it's a lot cheaper?
No.
Is that
because it's convenient? Then I would never go back to a taxi now.
Right.
Because it's so convenient. Yeah.
It's convenience and it's cool, right? Because you can split the fares if you have a bunch of friends. The customer service seems to be pretty good. You don't have to wait very long. But it is a lot cheaper too. I mean, if I take it to get to the airport, it's about half the price, and that to me that makes a big difference. I certainly don't want to pay any more money. So I think that one of the things that BMC, I know we're kind of straying off track here a little bit, but I think one of the things that BMC and other enterprise software companies are going to have to take a look at is how important is cost going to be? You don't want to be Uberized, right? I mean, or disrupted by a new player. Let me just give you another example.
Yeah.
I was at another conference, and this was a DevOps conference just a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't believe there was a presenter there, and there was a very large government agency that was sort of represented by the presenter, and they were using a product. It was from a company called Atlassian, which makes a product called Jira. Mm-hmm. And they were using it to do DevOps. And all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, they had 65,000 users on this system. I thought, wow, what's 65? And so the question is, how is something like that going to scale? And sure enough, they talked about it. And they had scaled to so that everybody could support, and they were using it for service desk as well as for software development. It's kind of getting everybody under the same roof. And I thought, this is really amazing. But it's mostly amazing because it's not really, when you think of Atlassian, you don't think of typically enterprise software. You think of, this is something that got started at a department level, and maybe it's kind of grown, but it's not like a ServiceNow or a REM. It's just not. It's not even in the Magic Quadrant, right? Okay, but in this particular case, that agency said, "Hey, it works. It doesn't cost us much. In fact, it's almost free." Okay, and we can get it to scale. So I think that sends a message. If you talk about being Uberized, that it's a message that big software enterprise companies, like ServiceNow, should probably have to consider is what's going to happen down the road because of companies like Atlassian. Are they going to take market share, or is the bigger companies going to be able to push them off and to say, hey, it's not enterprise software. We only buy something that's expensive. If it doesn't have this particular price point, we're not even going to touch it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really clear what's going to happen now. And maybe the Uber example doesn't really apply very well to selling enterprise software, but
no, I think it does.
Think about anyway.
Yeah, no. I think you're absolutely right, because we are moving. Yes, there are some that are still budget driven and so, but if you look at where the trend is and where we all eventually going to end up is, we need to provide a better end user experience, not for the end user experience itself. That's what we are today. But eventually that will lead to higher productivity, more engaged employees, and at the end of the day, the reason when we get up in the morning, we make more money. Right. And I think IT has such a big role to play there today, because they are the one who drives the business. There is no analog business anymore. There's nothing but digital businesses in the world. And that leads me to something very important I want to talk to you about. We've seen the beginning of this DSM consumer world. What do you think is next? You touched on it. Do you think that we're going to be that self-service is going to be automatic, that we're no longer going to have to talk to people, that automation and self-healing is going to take over? Or is that too far out? Where do you think the next big thing will be in the DSM world? What would you like to be?
I think it's going to be, where I think it's going is on the DevOps side. And that's where I see a lot of excitement right now. If you go to these IT or ITSM conferences, now all of a sudden there's a DevOps track. Mm-hmm. And there's just as many people in the DevOps track as there is in the ITSM track, because they figured out that Agile, at least ITSM has been around. It's kind of perceived as slow, steady, reliable. DevOps has been around too, but not as long, and it's perceived as being more agile. How is the way to get things twice as much work done in half the time. So I think that's something that's caught a lot of people's attention, and they're going to look to try to get both the IT's sort of the development side and the support side all under the same umbrella. For example, if somebody is a software developer right now and they get a call, maybe they're an analyst on a service desk, and it's about the software program for the company they're supporting. Well, they can kind of take the call, and maybe they can try to track down the software developers and report the bug or whatever it is. But they don't have a very good way typically, because these two groups aren't interrelated. And I think that down the road, that's going to change. You might have a CIO and you might have service desk. You might have an operations group. You might have technical support or application side. I think eventually you might have the CIO, and you're going to have this service desk function that's going to sit under the CIO. And then you might have operations or technical support and application. So it's getting everybody under the same umbrella. And BMC or ServiceNow or whoever is going to have to act more like they're in an agile environment and have a good DevOps strategy, because I think that's where it's going. And I think it's going to happen a little bit quicker. Now, I think it's fun to talk about that. Is it really going to happen? I'm not sure. And what does that really mean? I think all it means is that BMC should have a good DevOps strategy of some sort to talk about. What are they going to do, right? So. Well,
it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Dick, because you do bring a good view of it. It's rooted in real business, but you also see the future of what it is. So I appreciate you joining the Zoo, and every time you do. Yeah.
Can I one more point? Can I make one more point? And then then we can hang up. And I really think this is kind of a neat idea. But have you heard of malware or ransomware before?
Oh yes, I saw that.
Anyway, there was a hospital out here called MedStar, and not too long ago they got hacked, and as a result, all their systems were shut down. Okay, so if you're a hospital and you can't schedule appointments, you can't do prescriptions, everything stops. And so the ransomware was there, and it was $19,000 to get them freed up. $19,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money. I would have paid the money, right, to get them out. Let them go, but they didn't. So they were down for a while, and it really tests your backup and recovery procedures if you're not going to pay the money when something like this happens. But the best thing, and I think this is one of the best ideas that's come out of BMC for a while, is this whole threat director. They took the BBSA product and they've rebranded. It's called SecOps right now. Okay, and now that, for example, was caused by some old JBoss servers. It may have been freeware that were down rev, and it was an easy way for these hackers to get in there. With a product like BMC's Threat Director, that wouldn't have happened, because you would have been able to figure out where you were down rev-wise and then remediate without having to worry about these hackers getting in there. So, I think BMC's got some other good ideas perking around too, because I think security is going to be an important function in all companies moving forward.
Yeah. So, we have invested heavily in that, and one of our competitors just bought a company, security company today, I think it was, and it seems to be the way forward, that security is no longer a nice to have. It's a CEO issue, it's a board issue, and everybody has to take it very seriously. Right. Interesting. My wife's in healthcare, and she came home, and she's actually the one who told me about this. And we live in a small village up in the mountains here, and we have a community hospital. And they are terrified of being hacked, because they are vulnerable to these type of things. They don't have the same type of IT infrastructure. So it hits everybody nowadays.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you, Dick.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, my friend. And we'll do this again in a few weeks or months.
Okay. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Who
All
else
right.
that you out there? Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.